Grace to you and peace from God our Father and our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen. These kind of are terrifying times, aren't they? I mean, if the bombing in Boston taught us anything, it's that we realize that while terrorism is a global reality, now it seems to be even more so a domestic possibility. And the problem is, we don't know where our enemies are coming from. I mean, they might be coming from our very own neighborhoods. And then, of course, there's the global conversation about nuclear war and nuclear threat. And we can't help but wonder, especially among these nations that don't like this very much, what's it going to take before somebody pushes a button? Before some atomic bomb goes off, a nuclear annihilation of sorts? And it makes you wonder, doesn't it? How far are we from this end of time that many people seem to talk about? When we read these words in Matthew 24, we hear about violent times and violence done to faithful people. It's a promise. And it seems to be a prelude to the things that need to happen in order for everything to eventually come to fruition. And the underlying encouragement of Jesus throughout these words is, be courageous. Hold fast, and I'll be with you. While these days are frightening, there was a time not so long ago that seemed even more frightening. Some of you are even old enough to remember these days. Back in the 1930s, there arose a charismatic leader in Northern Europe who had his sights upon the domination of the Western world. Of course, you know his name as Adolf Hitler. He envisioned creating a new world order, a new kingdom, or a Third Reich. And he would stop at nothing to achieve this dream. And he systematically invaded weaker countries, and he sought the eradication of whole races of people. The German citizenry, many of which were Lutherans, were either spellbound by Hitler's dream, or they feared standing up to him. I mean, severe punishment, even to the point of death, awaited anybody who disagreed with the Fuhrer. And it seemed for such a long while that nothing could stop this man, this movement, and perhaps the end of civilization as we knew it. But there were some, and not many, but there were some who heard the call of God to do something to counter this insertion of evil. There were some who summoned up significant courage and who decided they could no longer sit by passively and do nothing. And they clung to a faith in God's guidance as they stood up to Hitler. Today, you will hear from one such person.
Hallo, ich heiße Dietrich Bonhoeffer. My name is Dietrich Bonhoeffer, for those who don't speak German. Please forgive me, I'm a professor by nature, so I brought some notes with me. But also to keep me on track, I'm also a preacher. I was born to Karl and Paula Bonhoeffer on February 4th, 1906. I was born in a aristocratic household. My parents were renowned historians, judges, and artists. And my father studied psychiatry and neurology in Berlin, and he held the same esteem as Sigmund Freud did in Austria. My family never went to church, not even on Easter. But I was read the Bible as a child every day and was sent to confirmation classes, as was the custom. I guess those two things made an impact on me. One day when I was 17, I announced to my brothers and sisters I would be a theologian. My brothers and sisters laughed at me and thought, well, why would you want to be a part of such a poor and petty and boring institution such as the church. I said if this was the case, then I would reform the church. I guess I truly am Lutheran. I attended college at my father's alma mater, University of Tübingen, for a couple of years and studied in Rome, and eventually graduated from Berlin University, where I began to work on my doctoral dissertation entitled Sanctum Communium, on how Christ is present in our communities of faith. Nobody read it. But I soon went back and I became an assistant pastor in Barcelona, Spain. What a change that was from the academic world. I used to preach about God as power and strength. And while I enjoyed this experience, I longed to return to my studies. So I went back to Berlin in order to complete my ordination. It was then that I was offered the opportunity to go to the United States of America and study at Union Theological Seminary in New York City. I was eager to go to the United States of America. I was able to study under some of the finest theologians of our time, Ralph Stock, Harry Emerson Fosdick, and Reinhold Niebuhr. I learned a lot from them, also from the blacks of Harlem. Their spirituals stirred in me some sort of clapping and excitement. I was never on rhythm, but I enjoyed it nevertheless. Their excitement and zest for faith excited me. In the 1930s, deep in the Depression, I thought it was very impressive to see a church reach out their hand and feed the hungry. And I counted as one of my most prized possessions the gramophone recording of Negro spirituals. A year later, I returned to Germany, but things had changed. The right-wing movement had gotten stronger. For the next few years, I taught catechism class to children, explaining the basics of faith. I was ordained during these years. I began lecturing at the School of Theology in Berlin. I was sorry to see that approximately 90% of the student population wore swastika armbands. But I preached on pacifism. I did not tolerate this display of nationalism in my class. I lectured. I took the opposite approach of what was prevalent in that time, which was focus on war. It was also during this time that I went through an important change in my own life. I never really attended church growing up, and even when I was at Union Theological Seminary, I never attended chapel. And I never liked pious Christian people talking about their conversions, but I myself was converted. One day when I was reading the Gospel of Matthew, the Sermon on the Mount, I read the Bible for the first time. I realized I had been using Jesus for my own selfish desires. I became even more committed to the pacifist cause. I became passionate about the church. Up until then, it was all academic. I became committed to the Bible and to prayer. I've not even been a regular prayer before, but now I felt I had a call to God, and that call was to strengthen the church. Adolf Hitler came to power on January 30th, 1933. He blamed all of our troubles on the communists and the Jews. Hitler claimed that he was not going to save our country, the church as well. I wish I could tell you I immediately took up responsibility to speak out against Hitler, but I did not. My brother-in-law's father passed away. He happened to be Jewish. He asked me if I could do his funeral. My colleague said, now is not the time for a Christian minister to do a Jewish man's funeral. So I turned him down. I asked for his pardon numerous times. But it was at this moment I made a decision in my life. I must be the voice for the voiceless. I must not hide and cower, be afraid. The church is to be the voice of the voiceless. The church must speak to the issues of the world. I became very involved at this time in the opposition. I gave public talks of what the church should do. I once spoke on the radio, but the broadcast was shut off before I even had a chance to finish. I gave public talks, and I tried to spread the word of peace and love. When Hitler's men ruled the church, I called for ministers to leave their posts. When Hitler spoke out more and more against the Jews, I spoke out more and more against him. Most of the church says, don't move too fast. You'd be ill-advised to protest now. Ill-advised. Ill-advised. I'll tell you what's ill-advised. It is ill-advised to not speak up for those who need spoken. It is ill-advised for you to go against your conscience, to go against what you believe to be God's truth. I am certain now that those who do not cry out for the Jews had no right to sing the Gregorian chant. When the state brings too little law or too much law, the job of the church is there to bind the wounds of the victims who are run over by the system. But the church must also be willing to put a stick in the spokes and the wheel to stop it. I really didn't know at the time what this would mean for me, but I had made that decision. Hitler clamped down on the church. Anyone of Jewish descent was hounded. University professors were fired. Colleague Paul Tillich was fired and had to leave the country. Refugees fled out of the country. I was invited to pastor 2 German parishes in London, England, to refugees there. I pastored these congregations from 1933 to 1935. I continued to keep in touch, though, with the Confessing Church of Germany. My phone bills were so large that the phone company would give me a discount. I'm sure they were tired of hearing my voice. At the same time, I tried to wake the world into awareness of the Confessing Church over Hitler's Reich Church. But no one would listen. We can't get involved in internal issues. So I was told. This time I was invited by Gandhi to come visit India. And how excited I was, for I longed to learn from a non-violent pacifist such as Gandhi. You see, I believe that the pagan East had more Christianity in it than the Reich Church of Germany. I believed that Christianity was on the brink of collapse. I had no hope the Confessing Church would ever win over the Reich Church of Germany. I would have gone to India, but the Confessing Church needed me. They wanted me back in Germany to head up a seminary. I was setting up their own seminary in opposition to Hitler's seminaries, and we would train our own pastors. I was only 29 years old, but I'd be training people the same age or older. So I went back. I headed up 2 seminaries, which were soon started and thrived. Seminary education at this point had been an academic affair. We taught our pastors about the Bible, how to read it, how to express that to the congregations, how to pastor people. I wrote a book at the time on the Sermon on the Mount called The Cost of Discipleship. I cried out against the cheap grace that the church had a habit of dispensing. I call for us to be obedient to Christ. Obedience comes first, then faith. So oftentimes the church has it the other way around. The Gestapo closed our doors in our seminaries in 1937. That didn't stop us. I went to the countryside, I went to rural churches and taught there. Nothing would stop us. But in 1938, every pastor was forced to make a pledge to Adolf Hitler. It went something like, I swear my allegiance to Adolf Hitler, the Führer of Germany, people of German Reich to be obedient to his laws. Sadly, most ministers signed that petition. Those who didn't were sent to the front lines of war. The only way I was saved is because I had an influential family, members who protected me, so I was able to avert arrest. In 1939, I was called to teach at Union Theological Seminary in New York City, and I accepted. I needed to get out. I was only there for a month. My people needed me. Now was not the time to abandon it. So, I came back to Germany. Possibly I'd still be there today. I didn't feel called to be with my country. What happened next may shock you. I joined the Nazi intelligence system. Became part of this system that had multiple people, most importantly Commander Beck, who was a powerful military figure at the time, who increasingly disagreed with Hitler. Two of my brother-in-laws were also part of the Nazi intelligence system. Outwardly, I gave allegiance to Nazism, but secretly I was working for the demise of Adolf Hitler. Our first plan was to arrest Hitler and have Beck take over the government. We had all the leaders of Germany behind us. I became a spokesman and was sent to Sweden and Switzerland to negotiate a treaty with them. But the Allies refused to negotiate. They said all Germans were rooted in evil. They could never imagine two separate Germans. We lost valuable ground. Many of our key officers started to speak out against Hitler, and they were removed from office. It was then made apparent to us the only way to defeat Hitler was to kill him. You'll never understand what I went through, the idea of killing someone else, but my mind was focused on the future. The future of Germany, the future of the church. I'm going to try to explain my actions. You know very little of what I went through. Most of my journals were destroyed. It had to be done. 2 unsuccessful attempts were made by groups to destroy Hitler. One was a bomb that never exploded. The other one, Hitler's schedule changed at the last minute. Averted assassination attempt. A few days later, the Gestapo arrived at my door with an arrest warrant. It was April 4th, 1943. They didn't know everything about what was happening, but they took me in. If they would have known everything, they would have executed me immediately. They kept searching to learn more. I was in Tegel prison, where I was for 18 months. I did more writing in prison than I ever had before. I wrote about ethics. You see, for me, I was not interested in reflecting anymore on the ancient creeds and the meanings, but instead, it became about where is Christ? And the answer was, He is here. He is in the community. He is the man for others. I talked about religionless Christianity, for I was discouraged with religion. What I mean by religion is things we do to work ourselves to God, things we do to earn a relationship with God. I'm not religious because I don't concentrate on religion. I want to concentrate on God, on Christ. I believe that life and freedom and compassion are essential, they are important, they are the core of life. And all the religious trappings must somehow be freed from that. The church has become like a spiritual chemist, where the church, the all-powerful church, lets everyone come to them and gives them things to do to improve their lives and get whatever spiritual stuff they need, and the church just dispenses it freely, cheaply. It is precisely the religion and our piety that keeps us from realizing how godless we are. We live in a godless age. We live in a godless society. A society that doesn't use God to fill the gaps of ignorance anymore. Our society is godless. But let's not claim it is from the devil, no. Rather, let's thank God for the godless society, because it is in such a society that we find God. He's not the God I first believe in, the God of power and strength. He's a God who was weak in the world. He was tossed out of this godless world into a garbage dump and crucified. And that is where we meet him. In weakness. And when we confront Christ, he takes us by the shoulders, turns us around, and leads us out into a godless world. He's indeed the man for others. And so we must be too. On July 20th, 1944, a full discovery had been made of our plans to kill Hitler. I was taken to the Reich offices and interrogated for 6 months. Then taken to Buchenwald, where I was kept for 2 weeks. Some of us were put on a truck, and we thought we were going to Flossenburg, where they hang prisoners. But the truck didn't go to Flossenburg. We went to Schomberg. We lived in an old school building there. It was apparent we were going to be free. The war was ending. On April 8th, 1945, we had a celebration that day. In the school building. They asked me to preach, and I preached. It was from Isaiah 61. By his stripes we are healed. How good would it be to finally be healed and be free? The Gestapo came that night. They called my name. Bonhoeffer, Dietrich. You're going to Flossenburg. One of Hitler's last orders was to destroy everyone who had any association with the assassination attempt. Many people were executed. Commander Beck, my 2 brother-in-laws, my brother Klaus, all executed. I never regretted coming back from America. As I had wrote a year earlier, my calling was quite clear to me. I must set forth the path that was set for me. The path of Christ, my center. My last known words were to an Englishman. Before death, I said, "This is not the end. For me, this is the beginning of life."
We sing together our hymn of the day, God is Here. As we do, if you have spiritual needs cards, you may hand those in to the ushers. Please rise.